Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 25th of May, and well, another fun day. Started with a slight gap lower and then proceeded to sell off, only to have value buyers coming back in, right back down towards where this previous low level was. Just above it, right around that 3870 range. The low before had been down to 56 range, so slightly higher, and brought it all the way back up. Unfortunately, with your short-term buyers, and then on the DOC right here, lifting was mostly responsible for that. Midterm buyers fading off, but red DOC staying above 13.5, which is not bad from a support standpoint, but the tilt up of orange, not great. Usually you'd want that orange to continue its dip, and no improvement from the shakeout though. Minus 14 is very close to that negative 13.5, which is usually strong enough to lift things. But again, 4,000 literally becomes that 23% above area that would definitely flip more towards the bullish sign. But this pivot lower from an NBI magenta below 25 level, it's never very strong. So we'll see if they're able to continue to push that up. We're not getting any strong short signaling, at least from NBI white, even if we're seeing more short activity, at least from a DOC standpoint, with the cyan here rising. So a bit of a mix, and that's kind of what we're seeing, is that mix of bull and bear fight, but still keeping it relatively weak in general. NQ a little bit softer than the S&P, and that's been the case for some time now. And you can see also not great from a DOC standpoint as far as turnaround mode. So we're probably going to get more of this weak consolidation as there's rotation moving back and forth. Big strong move from the euro is once they were able to keep it above that, they continue to apply that pressure, pushing it all the way back up to that 107. So back in the safety range, central bankers can breathe a little bit sigh of relief. It doesn't mean anything's going better in the eurozone, because it's not. But they keep talking about getting more serious about controlling things, but we really haven't seen that play out overall. From a gold standpoint here, looking at the future setup, slight improvement, just right back up to the break of that 0% there, and supported off that. We're still rising white with that NBI, so any fade in magenta at this particular point is going to cause a bit of a retracement coming back. And from an oil standpoint, it's still a disaster. We're up at the 110 level, and again, that just poses all sorts of constraints as far as growth and everything else. And this becomes that question mark between flattening inflation versus just persistent, and whether or not it's impacting growth in a highly negative way remains to be seen. We're probably going to start to get a better clarity of that as early summer rolls around, and whether or not it impacts travel and things like that, particularly as Memorial Day approaches. From a Treasury standpoint, continued flight to safety there, lowering the yield somewhat. So that's actually, this stock's a little bit better push. Flip back on that one would be definitely negative. And Bitcoin, from its standpoint, continues to just base along this, still in a somewhat bullish area right here, above the 29 level of the 23%. So that becomes again a critical benchmark here. Then you have that 29.3 is the 38%. So it looks like a push towards that 29.6, trying to get back up over that 30K psychological barrier. From an ETH standpoint, it was pretty much flat most of the day. It broke down a little bit and traded sideways, but again, I like those signals from it. And from DC, the 50K ES standpoint on S&P, weak signal came through, and then magenta made the turnaround. signing, not signing, but the white spike of the NBI needed to have DOC spread take place. Didn't quite happen until a little bit later. So it built up quite a bit of momentum. I mean, it did come, it was pretty short-lived because it caused a turnaround back and NBI white faded completely. So that's that bullish back and forth that we've been seeing from a bull standpoint. And from the 50K, it was certainly strong enough. And most of that happened a little bit later on. Here's where we are at the end of the day. Let's scroll back real quick to see how that day started. And it was pretty clean from a short standpoint. At the end of the day, look at the timestamp on that one. Just after the market closed, the sell signals came in, and then boom, significant gap down right back to the zero level. And from there, it just traded weak, and every time there was a pop, I wasn't around for much of that during the morning section, but by the time I was at it, we had already come down to the lows, so I just became looking for that spot where things started to improve, and that's where I was looking for these P2s with a stronger building DOC, and then finally when the dip came through, we ended up with one last little dip, and then the orange DOC dipped right back below with the crossover of steel above cyan, so that was sort of the beginning of what I thought would be a little bit of a turnaround. It was still back and forth for a little bit longer, and once it got over the 50% though, boom, took off, and all on positive extremes, so still wasn't afraid to take the sells on those, and as it came back, filling it quite a few of those all the way back to the beginning of the run, which was right about here, and it was just below the 50 and traded back and forth a little bit, and there was still a lot of weight leading, so I wasn't sure if we were going to get more of a breakdown, but Magenta kept building, and then we also saw a pretty strong DOC with the P2. Always looking for those when we start to get that turnaround support where the DOC is not breaking down to either a lower low from a DOC rate standpoint, and in this case it kept building from that. Sure enough, Magenta took a strong lead there, and we were getting steel coming back down below 1, and that's kind of what I look for as a reset level. And even if you waited until the full green DOC over cyan, and then of course at that point cyan was under red, which was a buy that setup, and that pretty much continued back and forth. Still plenty of, and this is where it becomes an interesting one, because every time you get those sell signals, if you're prepared for the turnaround on those, it becomes pretty effective from point-wise. 21 dipping all the way down to the O2. I mean, I'm not going to pass up those kinds of moves, particularly in a mean reversion setup that we've kind of moved back to, which is really more towards normalized trading. And then late day buyers came in right at the end just to drive things up in a pretty solid buy setup, and filled it back in already a little bit just at the close, and post market here pushing right back up to BP. So we'll probably see that break out into some positive area. I'm going to be in Milan most of the day tomorrow on the 25th, so probably won't see me or hear from me until the following day, but you'll have a report and an update as to where we're at as we get ready for setting up some of the indicator adjustments that I've made for the coming month. As always, trade well. Talk again later, and have a great one.